Hello, I'm Doug Muzzio. This is City Talk. He's the anchor on the top TV station for news in New York, WABC Eyewitness News. He's a correspondent for ABC's 2020 and sometimes host of Good Morning America. He's climbed the Empire State Building step by step, and he's been tested for prostate cancer on live television. He's reported on Iraq from the Middle East and on drug use among teenage Orthodox Jews in Brooklyn. He's covered the big stories: Columbine, Oklahoma City bombing, OJ, Flight 800. He's Bill Ritter, and I get to ask the questions.
A role reversal for once, huh?
Absolutely.
This is a little strange, isn't it?
Yep.
Does it feel strange?
Yes.
Oh.
It
Now
does.
I'm asking the questions
No, it
again.
does. Yeah, you're back. Welcome, Bill. Now, for the first time since I've had the pleasure of working with you at WABC, I get to ask you the question.
And how does that feel?
It feels very weird. I'd much rather be on the other side of the camera, and you're asking me questions again. So let's stop about this. Let's talk about several things. I mean, we've got an hour show, and we've got to do it in 27 minutes. I want to talk about media coverage of Iraq and the presidential election and just the media's influence, TV influence on politics in general. I want to talk about national versus local political coverage, because you've done it both. I want to talk about CBS. I want to talk about Dan Rather. I want to talk about your experiences with conventions. I want to talk about a lot. Let's start.
Okay, it's an open book. I didn't bring my tax returns or blood samples. So, but everything else I can talk about.
Okay. But are you running for office?
No.
Okay.
No.
Kerry's speech at NYU on Monday. Best speech, I think, that he's given, should have been given the day after the convention or second half of his convention speech. How do you guys cover somebody who's behind in the polls and needs to, in a sense, manufacture news? How do you cover Kerry? He seems to be more difficult than Bush.
Unfortunately, and I say this, and when I say we, I will not talk for WABC because I'm not their spokesman, and I'll talk more about the media. I think that what happens is, and especially with local, but I think it happens with national too, is you get very involved with a horse race, too involved with a horse race, and it becomes more like, well, wait a minute, he's becoming stronger and he's becoming more aggressive because he's behind in the polls, rather than say, whoa, here's what he's saying, and let's analyze what he's saying, and then trying to get Bush's response to it. It becomes much more, and we participate in this, we being all the media, that it becomes much more of the horse race and the numbers of the polls, and that we don't want to be, we should not be driven by polls in terms of our coverage.
Okay, I mean, and this raises a fundamental criticism of the media, TV, particularly since it's the major source of news, and you guys don't cover the issues. You cover the hype and the horse race. So that's a legitimate charge. Now, you're delivering the news and reporting the news. How do you justify what you're reporting with what you would like to report? How do you do that?
I try to minimize the difference between what I think we should report and what we do report.
Mm-hmm. And given your position, you have some impact.
Well, I have some impact over what I say and input over what I say, and I can control what I say because I write what I say. Mm-hmm. I try to minimize that, and I try to urge other people to minimize covering the horse race part of it. Mm-hmm. I think that we did, some people yesterday, in all the local coverages, did talk about the horse race. I think too much. On the other hand, that's not our doing. John Kerry did sort of bring this on himself. You said it just now. Should he have started talking like this right at the convention instead of trying to out-military the Republican Party, reporting for duty? Well, that was only half of John Kerry's Vietnam story, and it's an honorable half. And I think we salute and have to honor that because he was a hero in Vietnam. But there's the other side of John Kerry's Vietnam story, which was also honorable, I think, and certainly a lot of people in this city would believe that. Right. And that it was he spoke out against the war as vehemently as he fought the war. And he has shied away from that. Well, embrace everything. He Why doesn't he embrace that part of his career?
Why?
Well,
particularly,
you're the political analyst.
Well, but don't forget, I'm asking the question. Why, in terms of a message that he wants to communicate out to the American public, does he not tie his anti-war stance of 30 years ago, 32 years ago, to his current positions? Why? Is he afraid of it? Is it his focus groups? What's going on?
I think
What's your sense?
I think it's been an unfocused campaign. If there are focus groups, and I don't know if there are, I assume there are some, but I think it's been an unfocused campaign, and I think he set himself back. And the Republicans and George Bush, they've run a masterful, if at times I would say not clean, campaign. But it's been a brilliant campaign. And they've put John Kerry where they want to put John Kerry. And there is this, I think, sense, I was at the convention here in New York all 5 days, or 4 days, and there is this sense that there is this Alice in Wonderland quality to this, because they have the ability, for some reason, the Republicans, to whatever they say is sort of, that's the way it is. Even if it's not true.
Humpty Dumpty, but a thing means what I say it means.
Exactly, and they've done a masterful job at it. And I think that the Kerry campaign, and I'm not talking about how I feel politically about anything, I think the Kerry campaign has not done a masterful job of getting back and sending out their own message, regardless of what the Republicans are.
So the Republicans have set the frame of the debate and the tone of the debate.
And the Kerry campaign ends up on the defensive. You know, the debate over 30 years ago, and what happened with each of these candidates' behavior during the Vietnam War, is, I think, such a big distraction. And now with the CBS situation, it has become even more of a distraction. And in fact, the White House got copies of those documents. They didn't question the veracity of it. They, in fact, released those documents to all the press without questioning the validity of what those documents were saying. And now the focus has been that CBS got snookered and these were false documents, forged documents. Not that the gist of the documents wasn't true. And the White House put those documents out. They didn't say, this is not true. They put them out.
Because apparently they believed, at least initially, that they might have been true. So this arch conspiracy theory that it's a Karl Rove plant just doesn't seem to be there.
Well, I don't think most people believe that, but there is a possibility. I don't think that we're operating on that.
But you're saying that we keep getting diverted by sideshows. The Dan Rather CBS issue is in many ways simply a sideshow. But
we could talk about that. It's an important issue. No, I mean, the Rather situation is an important issue for media and for society and how we do our jobs, and it's an interesting topic of discussion. But what does it have to do with creating jobs? What does it have to do with paying for health care, 43 million Americans without health care? What does it have to do with this war in Iraq? What does it have to do with the war on terror? What does it have to do with the United Nations, where the President spoke this week? Nothing.
Right.
And I think that we end up talking about this side issue over here and ignoring the real big issues that affect people's lives.
Why are you people talking about that then? What drives you guys, the media? Why? What is it?
Well, I think it's easy. And I think that oftentimes we unfortunately take the easy way out, but I don't think we do it all the time. I think we try to talk about issues. Part of it is we're reflecting, I think, what's happening in society. This is a long campaign, and it becomes trivialized to some degree. So if the candidates are talking about this, if the campaigns are talking about this, if to some degree people are talking about this, then we sort of reflect that. Should we rise above it and ignore that? There's an argument to be made we should, and we don't always do a good job of doing that. But I do think that to a man and woman who covers this, they would say we want to do issues. We do not want to get involved in false Swift boat ads or faked documents that CBS used, and these are distractions to, I think, what is a real campaign. And
in fact, these distractions, though, have strategic implications. I would argue that this helps George Bush because now the story is CBS Dan rather than the service in Vietnam, which itself was a bit of a sideshow issue, to get to the real issue, and that is Iraq now.
Well, and the question is, you have to ask is, does he really want to talk about that? I think Kerry now sees that he wants to talk about it, but does he want to talk about it because he's 5 to 10 points down in the polls? Does he want to talk about it because there's less than 6 weeks left in the election? Why is he talking about it now? Why wasn't he talking about this in July. You know, Howard Dean, it seems to me, set the tone, and Kerry didn't pick up on that as much as he could have about Iraq. And now he's trying to make up for lost ground.
And part of Kerry's problem is that he's so nuanced, that he's muddled, that he's in some ways too exact in a pedantic way with his words and doesn't say what he means and means what he says. Was it your impression about this speech that it was a corner turner, or, as the Times reported on page 1, in harshest critique yet, Kerry attacks Bush over war in Iraq, but the subheadline is President answers with quick and sharp rebuke? Going back to your point, they were right on top of this guy.
They are running, the Republicans are running a brilliant campaign.
Within the same news cycle. Forget
Right.
it. The president was talking about this within an hour.
Because, you know, nuance, you know, you're a college professor, you know, nuance is important. Kerry's a complicated guy. He is not, you know, he doesn't swagger, you know, he walks calmly. In some quarters, that's respected. In America, where, you know, television is everything, the big screen is everything, unfortunately, I think, to some degree, you know, decisiveness, immediate action, even if it's wrong, is often viewed in many quarters as better than mulling things over, seeing the grayness of an issue, changing your mind. And the Republicans have done, I think, a masterful job, from Rudy Giuliani talking about this at the convention, to Bush and Cheney attacking Mr. Kerry on this. They've done a great job of turning what, you know, I'm sure Mr. Kerry thinks is an enlightened Renaissance kind of thinking into weakness. And so the real war hero becomes, you know, the girly man. Mm-hmm. It's, you know, it's Lee Atwater. It's brilliant. It's sort of dirty, but it's brilliant, and it's been very effective, and could very easily, who knows, you know, help re-elect president.
And they understand your medium, and they understand the media in general in a way that the Kerry campaign doesn't, but the Clinton campaign sort of did. Kerry's campaign reminds me of the Dukakis '88 campaign. Slow to react, and only now that they're bringing on the Clinton people do they have this war room mentality. But again, we're talking about tactics and strategy.
And it's not just all of a sudden the switch is pulled and boom, the Clinton people take over. There is this transition period where, you know, there are both camps that are operating within one camp.
Okay, let's just talk about TV coverage of the convention, since you were the lead anchor for WABC for that convention. Talk a little bit about background. Talk about the news operation. How many people were involved? What did it take to put together those broadcasts from the Garden?
It was, Doug, the most ambitious television project I think we've been involved in. The entire station was involved. And you know, we wouldn't have done it just for a political convention, because we didn't do that for Boston and the Democrats.
Right.
But it's in New York. It's in New York, where registered Democrats outnumber registered Republicans 5-1. It's in New York, where the mayor is really a Democrat posing as a Republican. It's in New York, where Rudy Giuliani and George Pataki gave keynote addresses. It's in New York, where the Republicans wanted to have this, I think, and I say this without prejudice, to exploit 9/11. It's in New York, where, you know, hundreds of thousands of demonstrators were in the streets. It's in New York, where the police behavior towards the demonstrators now source of much controversy. It's in New York, where traffic was disrupted, and life in Midtown was disrupted. It's in New York, which is our hometown, and so we put all hands on deck. Everyone went along, and it was a wonderful experience as a team. Having said that, you know, the networks didn't cover much of this. They covered 3 hours.
Exactly.
We covered the story, how it affected New York. We covered the story, I think, politically. We covered it, you know. I'm very proud of what this team did. I think we analyzed stuff. We covered the events of that night. We certainly covered the demonstrators. We had 2 reporters on the demonstrators and how they were treated and the arrests and what they were trying to say. And we had, you know, analysts. In addition to you, we had, and you gave us some great insight. You know, we had Charlie Rangel and Christy Whitman every night analyzing what happened. We did not, I think, just serve up pablum. We tried to
Well, you did
add,
Michael Moore too.
and we did Michael
And you
Moore.
loved it.
Well, it was interesting. He became, you know, this bigger than life celebrity. You know, in the Lion's Den. Talk about in the Lion's Den. This guy had his own protection. He had New York Police Department protection, because he was at some risk walking around there. You know, when John McCain calls him a disingenuous filmmaker, and everyone boos when he's at the press box there because he was covering it for USA Today. He felt like he was in some real danger when he walked among the crowds.
Wow,
But,
imagine being booed by 40, 50,000 people.
well, and there were thousands of people there who booed him, and we tried to do this as well. We tried to find out who these people were, the delegates and the guests there, because they were not really who the speakers were.
Right.
Rudy Giuliani and Pataki, McCain,
Moderates.
Schwarzenegger, moderates. They don't agree. These delegates did not agree with most of what these guys were saying. They were anti-abortion, the delegates, pro-guns, anti-gun control, anti-gay rights. Arnold Schwarzenegger, Giuliani, Pataki, John McCain. They are not social conservatives like the delegates were. And we did talk about that. We also looked at the racial makeup of the delegates.
Right. Right. Well, you and I talked about that.
Right. And your point then, and it was a good one, is that yes, there's a 70% increase. 70, was it 17 or 70% increase?
70.
It was 70, but it was starting from so low. That's right, 70. It was starting from so low in terms of diversity that if they could have doubled it and they'd still have 5.
Right.
It was very small. There was a sea of white faces out there.
Now these
Anyway, we didn't just regurgitate
Right.
the primetime speeches. I think we tried to give some texture and context to this convention.
What about the network's lack of coverage, the broadcast network's lack of coverage of that convention? Was that wise? Was it appropriate? What criterion do you even use?
For political junkies, it's not wise,
Right.
but from
an economic point of view.
and not just economic, from a real news sense. Okay. These conventions, and I know you're of a certain age, as I am, that you remember when conventions actually did some real business.
Right.
They don't do business, and they are, in fact, a television event. They are television events masquerading as a political convention.
It's an infomercial.
It is, and so at what point does a multi-$100 million news organization say, wait a minute, it costs us a lot of money to do this. We're not just going to give them a platform, no pun intended, to talk. Democrats or Republicans. Now, we put all that money into it, and we put all that effort into it as a local station because this was a huge local event.
Right. So you guys more than made up for your network's lack of coverage, but and the local affiliates of New York affiliates made it up. But that wasn't the case in Boston or otherwise. You don't have that.
No, the other cities, our ABC-owned and operated affiliates, stations, would bring in a political reporter and a cameraman, and that's how they cover it.
That's it.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's continue about Republican conventions, but let's go back 32 years. I know, we've talked about this many times, our own personal politics. You were at the Republican convention in 1972. Tell us about it.
Miami Beach, 1972. I was at the Democratic convention there, too, as well. I was not a reporter.
Is that your first conventions?
Yeah. I did not get inside the Republican convention. I was inside the Democratic convention. I was doing some radio reporting, actually. But I was a demonstrator at the Republican convention. I was an anti-war demonstrator. I was very much.
Tell us why and the nature of the demonstrations. Just
the Vietnam War was raging. Nixon had started the Vietnamization program, which was an attempt to bring troops back home because the war was so very unpopular, and 50,000 American troops had already died, and create an army of Vietnamese, South Vietnamese, a country that was made-up country, to run the country and fight the North Vietnamese.
This sounds eerily like Iraq, but go ahead.
Well, it's not. I'm not the first. You're not the first person.
Yeah, I understand. Go ahead. I'm sorry for the interruption.
And I, like many young people back then, I was 22 years old, and many young people back then were very much against the war, and it was like I think some young people now, although not as many. It was much more a pervasive a protest for society. This became people's lives, protesting that war in Vietnam, and it became my life. I spent most of my college career protesting the war, and so I went to Miami, organizing demonstrations against it. There was going to be in San Diego, where I went to school, and 2 days after the convention moved from San Diego because of a scandal involving the Justice Department, an antitrust lawsuit, and some financing of the convention. They moved it to Miami 3 months before the convention was to be held. And I got in a car and drove cross country and stayed there for 3.5 months.
What did you do?
We organized demonstrations. It was a little zooey in Miami because we had worked for almost a year in San Diego with a coalition of groups from labor and anti-war groups and women's groups, gay rights groups, student groups. really getting a broad base of anti-war support. Once the Republicans moved their convention in 1972, this is history, I'm not so sure everyone wants to hear this, but it was crazy. You know, you had the yippies and the zippies and the pippies, and you know, we were negotiating one time in Miami Beach for some camping ground space at a park for the hundreds of thousands of people that were going to come to demonstrate. And you know, one of the zippies shows up and throws a pie in the city councilman's face. We're not trying to have a pie fight here, so
right.
it made everyone look stupid and ridiculous. And
there's theater, and then there's theater.
They didn't take us seriously after that,
right?
You know? But it was you know, there were 1,000 people arrested at that thing, and I was one of them at the night of Nixon's acceptance speech in 1972.
So you have an arrest on your record?
I think the charges were dropped. You know,
okay.
They just rounded everyone up. They wanted everyone.
But you deserve to have been arrested, not like some of the New York demonstrators.
I was protesting.
Okay.
They swept people up and they tear gassed it. I'm not so sure I deserve that.
Okay, and then, well, not tear gassed. And then we have a picture of you. Where is this picture taken? Which hangs on a larger version of which hangs on your wall in your office.
Proudly, I am not, unlike some candidates for public office, not afraid of my past, and I'm willing to talk about it. I'm just talking about it here.
Right.
It's not something I dwell on, but I'm certainly proud of it, and it has forged my own beliefs, and it was. You know, as a young person, I took a stand, and I was not afraid to take a stand. I'm proud of that. I hope my children have the strength of character to do the same thing. This was the picture of me with the wild hair is in 1972 or 1971, speaking at an anti-war rally at San Diego, at my campus, San Diego State University.
Okay, now given your strong personal political beliefs, how do you?
Now, when you say that, you know, I'm not a strong Democrat, Republican.
No.
I was against the war.
I'm not saying partisan, but you have strong political beliefs that go beyond definitions of party. Right. How do you not let this, in some way, filter into either what you're reporting, the stories that you choose? How do you deal with that tension, if there is such a tension?
I don't think there's a tension. I mean, I do think that, you know, this question of objectivity is far overblown. No one's objective. I think the question of fairness.
Okay. Define it.
You know, we all come to the table with a belief system. Whether you believe in God or don't believe in God, whether you believe in abortion rights or don't believe in abortion rights, whether you believe in gun control or not, whether you believe in war or not, we all have certain beliefs, and I don't think that anyone in journalism would say you shouldn't have that. I don't think that we as journalists should espouse them. Some do. I don't think that it's our job to tell people what they should think. And I would hope that the viewers of our newscast don't get a sense that I'm partisan or unfair or trying to proselytize from the news set, because that's not my job, and I don't want to do it.
No, and nor do you do it, but how do you not do it?
I don't believe people should be discriminated against based on their ethnicity or their nationality. I don't believe. I believe people should be able to live how they want, if it doesn't interfere with other people. You know, I have an interesting retort to people who don't like gay marriages. Then don't marry a gay person.
Right.
You know. But I don't think that necessarily comes across.
No.
But I do think in some ways, you know, in some ways it does. You know, I want to be known as a person who, when you're watching me deliver the news, you know, I want people to know that you know, I believe people have a right to live freely. I believe people have a right to treat each other with respect. I don't believe people should discriminate against other people based on their race or their creed or their color, their skin, or anything else.
But you have your weblog where you can editorialize, and your weblog, Behind the News with Bill Ritter, is much more open about your sense of events and the news, even though there as well it's not partisan and it's not proselytizing, but clearly there's a point of view there that you may not see in a news broadcast.
I don't like seeing people killed. I don't like seeing young men and women die. I don't like to see violence to children. I'm a father.
A loving father, I might add.
Well, I appreciate that. I try, and I mean, I can't help that. I love my children, but I hope I'm loving in the bigger sense of the word, and I want that to come through. I don't think the blog is terribly partisan.
No,
but,
not
you know,
at all.
am I against people killing each other? Do I think that should be the absolute last resort? And am I afraid? Yes, I am against that. Am I afraid to say that? Absolutely not. I'm saying it right now. I think that, you know, anytime we put young people in harm's way, it has to be the absolute last resort, because it really says that everything else has failed. And I don't think we should fail. And I don't want to be in a position where we're saying we have failed, because I'm thinking, what do I want to do with my children? Do I want to be able to tell my children that, you know, this generation failed and you're going to have to go die for something? I don't want that to happen. Whether it's fighting terrorists or Saddam Hussein or Hitler or anybody, you know, how do we stop things without violence? How do we stop things without war? And I don't think this is it's not just an anti-war statement. That's something that we should give thought to every day, every time we put our feet out of the bed and touch the ground in the morning. You know, how can we live the best life we can? How can we do the right thing every day? And how can we prevent, you know, people from being slaughtered? And I don't think that's a bad thing. Is it idealistic? Perhaps. Is it naive? Yeah, some people in our newsroom would say it's totally naive.
And they do, but they love you for it
well,
anyway.
I hope so, anyway.
Bill, it was a pleasure.
This is it?
This is it. We've got another half-hour show. You have to come back.
I will.
Come back after the election.
Okay. You want to
You're
ask
my first guest.
Personal questions. Was that personal now?
Yeah, I would certainly say so.
Does it get me fired? I don't know.
No, I doubt it.
Thanks, Doug.